entertainment changes all the time. There's the hot thing right now will be completely obsolete in just a couple of years, and we needed a place that we can continually refresh and keep bringing new things in. We needed to be able to test things out and see if people were finding that they were fun, and if it wasn't working in one location, we needed to be able to move to another location. And so this and the amusement park feel clashed a lot, because for amusement parks and the way that you theme a place, you really have to make commitments, and you need to bolt things on the ground, and they need to be where they are, and they're very part of a very solid user experience. We needed a place that was modular and moved around a lot. Next, we have to really figure out who are we making this for, and our broad audience was young adults and families. Young adults in the sense of people who would come in at night and drink and play, and families as an audience that would come in during the day and bring their kids. This is still very broad, so we had to drill down into a couple of user personas that kind of described a little bit more who we're building for, and maybe you might find yourself identified by some of these. Our first one was the explorers. These are experienced junkies, people who are looking for the coolest thing out there, who are constantly scouring things to do in LA and trying to find the awesomest experiences out there to go check it out. The Tinderers. This was a very particular one where we wanted to target people who are going out on dates, but it's very early on in their relationship. It's the second or third date, and they're looking for something interesting to do that's not just going to dinner, that gives them an opportunity to get to know the other person better. So a lot of our games and things like that are meant to really get a sense in a very, very subliminal way of what the other person is like. The Wolfpack, this was a very important demographic, and we didn't have this demographic in particular because we wanted to make a place for them. We just had to keep them in mind. These are the groups of friends who go out, party incredibly hard, and just rage all night. And the reason we had to include them is because these are the people who will break everything. They will just come in and they will act like crazy, and they will leave your place in shambles. So we had to make sure that we included that we built for them so that our things, our games and everything were sturdy enough to withstand a lot of the hostility. The diners, this is one where I felt the most identified. These are kind of older couples or families who are sort of past their bar going and club going dates that wanted and mostly just go to dinner at each other's houses and are looking for something. We wanted to offer them something that would give them a chance to be like, oh, hey guys, instead of doing the same thing every time and staying in, let's go out and have fun. The transplants, these are newcomers, people who just moved to LA and don't really know anyone. I've heard it very often from many people that when you don't have any friends in LA and you move here, it can be very hard to make new friends. Just everything is so spread out and it's kind of hard to connect, and you have to be a certain personality type, kind of extroverted. And so we wanted to make a place that if you came here as a single person, you would forge little micro friendships with strangers and start getting to know them and maybe connect and have a friendship. And the last one is the Suits. These were corporate groups looking for something better for their company to do, to host a company event rather than the same boring retreat. Once we identified all that, we had to figure out how to fund this. We needed the money to actually make this place happen, and we really had no idea. We were so early on, we had no idea what it was going to look like and what it was going to feel like, and so we had to take a shot in the dark. And we hired an architectural visualization company to help put some of our initial ideas together into a little animation that we can show investors and show partners and be like, this is what we want to build. And so this is what we put together. It's called a sizzle reel, which is meant to just excite and sell a vibe. And it's funny where it started. Oh, the music is just coming out of my computer. That's good. So we have this mysterious circus opening. You have this crazy virtual reality robots and cook arms making you drinks. This gigantic stadium with the tablets on the tables. A whole secret workshop, an arcade. And the funniest part of that is pretending that we were actually going to open in 2017. Mind you, we put this together at the end of 2016. So that tells you how we did not know what we were getting into when we started. Anyways, that was successful. We got our funding. We got it was ridiculous because we sold in that video like $100 million facility, and we were looking for funding as a fraction of that. So when we finally got that, we're like, okay, now we're going to build with this. And so the first step, now that we are set, we are committed, we have the money, and now we have to deliver on it, and we're starting from scratch. We want to make a theme place, but we have no theme. Our company has never been sort of exposed to consumers, and so it's not like we can rely on Mickey Mouse or existing IPs to come up with a look and feel. So we had to come up with our own. And so what we started with was just putting together mood boards and vision boards and an inspiration deck and figuring out what it is that this place was going to look like. And so we narrowed down to 3 particular aesthetics that we wanted to hit and mix and mishmash. The first one was obviously a circus. We've been called 2-bit circuses this entire time. Our co-founders, our CEO and CTO, are actual trained circus performers, so the circus really lives in our blood. And we wanted to do something like that, but we didn't want to be we didn't want to be on the nose about it. The aesthetic of the circus is really harsh and like garish and very intense, and there's mixed feelings about it because circuses weren't traditionally really nice places to animals and performers and everything. So we didn't want to make just a straight up circus looking place. Another aesthetic that we adopted was just looking at the past history of toys, pop culture, video games, and old school arcades, and figuring out what about those elements was so special and iconic. And there are some links that we were seeing, like a Viewmaster is basically an old version of a VR headset, so we can see how the technology evolved. And the last aesthetic was just an industrial feel. 2-bit Circus, everything that it's a pretty scrappy company before we built the park. We were all prototypers and engineers and designers that just like built things really quickly and very, very firmly fit into the maker camp of things. And so we wanted to keep that alive. We didn't want to make a place that's overly polished, all fiberglass and like really nice and slick. We wanted to be able to expose the hardware. And this aesthetic also really worked with it, the ability to be flexible, because if you have to expose some cables or move some things, like if you really build the place to accept that, then it doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel sloppy. So once we identified those 3 kind of aesthetic pillars, we started looking for things that were successful at blending them together. So we looked at a lot of vaporwave, which is a particular retro-futuristic style, very kind of modern Tron. We looked at things that were built and exposed to hardware and showed how they were built that weren't steampunk. It's very easy to just fall into that trap, and we were very concerned that we would just build a steampunk park and everybody would be like, this is the steampunk park. So we were looking for aesthetics that evolved maybe from steampunk but looked a little bit more modern. We looked at lighting. We looked at marrying incandescent lighting from the past with LED and neon. And we looked at what to do with our walls. We were going to have plenty of walls around. What are they going to be? How are we going to treat them? And how are we going to cover them? And so in here, this one in particular, oh no, I hit that. This in particular caught our eye because it kind of reminded us of circus stripes, the yellow and red striping. And we were like, well, we got to come up with our own type of circus stripe. It's a very iconic thing, and that could carry a lot of the feel of the circus if we use this element. And so we found that, and we're like, wait, we've seen this before. It must have a name. If there's a particular aesthetic to it, then it has to have a name. And funny enough, when we looked into what it was, we found something really interesting. It's called Dazzle Camouflage, aka the Razzle Dazzle. And this was actually used in ships during World War I. And you guys have any idea why? So interesting enough, this was like the first stealth technology. By painting ships this way, it meant that an enemy ship, putting up a telescope or binoculars and looking at it, they would not be able to tell what the heck that thing was. They couldn't tell if it was coming or going, what its heading was, what its shape is. They couldn't identify. It was really meant as a way to throw things off visually. And so we found that super interesting, and we wanted to play with that. Obviously, it was maybe too disoriented. It's really intense when it's black and white like that. So we play with lower contrast, and we really built that both into we had to redo our brand into the brand and into the way that we treated surfaces and walls at the park. And the final thing that we arrived was this picture over here on the right. It was very randomly came across it. It was from like a 3D text tutorial of how to make cool 3D text. But it really struck me as a really good combination of the three aesthetics. There's a neon in there. There's a bit of that circus rigging feel. There's the industrial. There's all the exposed material. And this really kind of became our guide. Like, that's it. That's what our park should feel like slightly dangerous, but really cool and interesting. And so once we finished that, we had a really fantastic, and I just showed you a tiny little bit. This was an immense mood board that we had. But we had to figure out how actually are we going to apply this to all the different things that we want to make in the park. And so the way that we solved that was by applying that theme through a spectrum from the past to the future to each zone. Which that means that each zone would have a little bit of a personality that would kind of show a gradient from moving from the past over to the future. So over on the left was the Midway. That's the Carnival Midway, very turn of the century. That one's going to feel like the most old school nostalgic thing. Bar and food, we also wanted to be kind of quaint and vintage about it. And as we were going up with the technology in these places getting more and more intense, we would start ramping up the futuristic look and feel. And so at the very end, where the VR arena is, where the highest end, most production value stuff is, that's where it would look the most futuristic. Around this time, and we are probably at about maybe a year out, we acquired a location. We have been looking all throughout LA for the perfect venue, and thank God we found it. It's in downtown LA in the Arts District. We found this double warehouse that was a really wide open space, gave us a blank canvas. There was some demolition that we had to do. That wall that you see at the very back had to come down and made the warehouse twice as long. And on the outside, it looks incredible. It's this crazy sort of Bauhaus, Art Deco, weird place, and it was just covered in these stripes, which we had to repaint, sadly. But it's just a really cool building with a ton of personality. So now we had a place, we had a kind of an aesthetic that we had to hit. Now it's time to start making it real. So we dove into concept art. And this is the first time that I had worked with concept artists, especially people from the themed entertainment industry. I had done work with illustrators before and other things, but this was a big one for me because I'm like, these guys are probably used to dealing with like expert creators and everybody, and I'm just like doing this for the first time. I'm not quite sure how to direct this. So it was a really cool learning experience to get these really talented people on board, tell them things, show them random pictures, and have them come out with their interpretation of it. So this was our concept for the bar. It was going to be this crazy double-decker abstract carousel that had two levels, a deck at the very top that was going to be kind of like a lounge. It would have these corkscrewing staircases going up, and that little fairing that is it okay? The fairing that carousels have. And I don't know if you can see over here, but we came up with this idea where the carousel horses, we would just do half of them and have the butt stick out of the bar itself so that people can sit in there and have a drink. Then we moved on and tried to imagine some of the other zones that we had in mind. There was a Midway, creating little booths with like very modular 10 by 10 by 10 cubes that we could constantly make new games, pull things out, pop them back in. We just needed to work out what the look and feel was going to be on the outside. That was the concept for story rooms, where I want to create this wild pastiche of doors where you wouldn't know where the real doors were. And you would have an operator to like basically guide you, like this is the one you have to open. And once you open in story rooms, the cool thing is that once you open and go in, that room has its own theme in it, so it's always like stepping into another world. This was the arcade, which was again that vaporwave sort of aesthetic that felt very 80s and had that cool neon haze. And this is Club 01 with a stage, a host, and somebody going up there making a fool of themselves, and everybody over here with interactive tablets. Or at the moment, we were exploring interactive projections from the Sony Xperia projectors that didn't quite work out. That's too bad, but we made the place work. This is some of the stuff that we came up with for VR. That's a cabanas up there showing a person playing and their friends having a blast. You can see how things are starting to feel a little bit more modern here. This is going to be the entrance to the VR arena with this really mysterious glowing pillar of light where you had to walk in. And this was a very ambitious concept that we haven't quite done yet, but we're still looking to do it, which is basically VR bungee jumping. You strap on a headset and you're told to jump off a thing that makes you feel like you're jumping off a waterfall or a crazy building or something. And you will land, you would have a harness, obviously, with a winch. You would land on a ball, on a pit of balls at the very bottom. So after, and again, this is just a very small sampling of all the concept art. There's a ton more, but we started landing on a place that really felt like it was mashing all these things together. The arcade, the carousel bar, like it does remind you of a carousel, but it's not quite exactly a carousel. We were incorporating more futuristic elements, polygons, things that reminded you of a digital culture, and you know, we were very idealistic. We were thinking we could do fire in an interior facility, but that didn't work out. But anyways, it started really coalescing, and we're like, yes, this place is starting to look like something, and we're really excited about it. It does feel unique. This is not a regular arcade. At this point, we had spent a lot of time making pretty pictures, and it was fine and everything, but we had gathered a lot of vendors and partners who were helping us do this. We had a theming partner called Weber, who was going to build the environments themselves. We had a lot of tech partners from lighting and whatnot that were going to help us, you know, do this entire thing, and all of them were like, wow, this concept art is great. You're not, I mean, let's be real here, like the budget and the realities are like, not a lot of this is going to happen, and not only that, but we still don't have, and this happened to the internal team as well, I realized that people didn't quite know. They have an idea of what it looked like, but they didn't have an idea of what it feels like to be. What is the user experience? What do people do as a whole? And so that was a big turning point where we decided to take the entire creative and design team at 2-Bit Circus. We locked ourselves in a room for 2 weeks, and we came up with a 60-page document that we called the Creative Specifications, the Creative Spec for short. We brought in a storyboard artist to sit in with us. And so what we did here is we created a narrative based on an average of the user personas that we had, that would go in a linear approach through the entire park. And even though the park is designed as a sort of a hub and spoke, where the hub was a bar and everything else kind of radiated from it, we wrote a narrative of somebody going through all the different experiences and the sights this person would see, the emotions they would feel. And we did this through with the storyboard. Like, we would literally be talking about these things out loud and like sharing ideas, and the storyboard artist is just going at it, like trying to determine what it is that we were saying. And so we combined storyboards along with like a written down. I cannot stress how clarifying it is to actually just write a story and just write all these things down. Everything that's just stuck in your head and might be hard to get it all in pictures, but if you write it all out, it really has it's a really clarifying thing to do. And so we combined the narrative, a written narrative with a visual narrative. And then for every zone of the park, we created a little spec sheet that showed the color palette that we were aiming for, all the different details that we want to put in there, what kind of materials we would use, and just an overall summary of like, this is the emotion that we want people to feel. This was very useful, especially for our partners, as it really started clarifying to them what it is that they were trying to build and what were the goals that they were trying to hit. But soon after that, we were completely out of concept land, and now we really got to get serious. Like, things need to get built. So things get real. And here's where the chopping block starts showing up, and where your dreams are crushed. Not really. We were able to do many, many amazing things, but we learned a lot about what things are important to keep and which we should discard. So this is a layout of the place as we started. By the end of the creative spec, things look like this. You still have the carousel bar there at the end. We had this wild idea to create almost like a Space Mountain type of attraction, where it had seated VR pods playing a game called Battlezone. You guys might have played in VR. It was just really crazy expensive. That was going to be, again, our Space Mountain, our biggest, coolest attraction. We had 6 cabanas over there in the back. We had the arena over there with the closed environment with a gap that you would walk into. Club of Ones over here, kitchen. Within the span of about a month and a half, talking with the architects and realizing all the things that were going to become real, the layout started looking like this. We shifted the location of Club of One and the kitchen. We lost the wall in the VR arena, so all that work, that amazing visualization, wasn't going to work out, and we had to completely pivot and figure something else out. The cabanas were reduced to 4 to get more space to do other things. And most importantly, and my biggest heartbreak was the bar. The amazing carousel bar that we spent so much time visualizing and imagining got cut. And so that was a big surprise to me because when it was cut, when I finally got the news, all the design team, everybody is all hands on deck building the games. Because I'm showing you guys the big picture. There's multiple little stratas of picture. There's the big picture here of everything. There's the medium picture of the zone, each zone itself, and then there's even the tinier picture of every individual game. Now we weren't building every game. We were building about roughly a third to half of them, and then curating from third partners other ones. But basically everybody was already going at it, making all this stuff, and I was told that the bar didn't exist anymore. So rest in peace, Carousel Bar. And so I was basically given about 5 days to come up with a new design for the carousel bar, and I don't have any concept artists, I don't have anybody. I just have to, lock myself in a room and figure something out. But thankfully, I was able to come up with an idea that turned out pretty real, and it was kind of one of the first ideas that I had, which was take what worked out of the carousel bar, the things that we really wanted to keep. I wanted those horse butts. A lot of people were like, no, that's going to be, and I'm like, we've got to have the horse butts. They're going to be great. And so we wanted to keep a bit of that element of that central pillar. I still wanted something that from a distance you could see kind of converging down on this spot that obviously we want people to return to. Every time you finish a game, you're like, all right, what are we going to do now? Big glowing bar, let's go have a drink. And I was really surprised. When I submitted this, I thought that the theming company and the constructors were going to tell me, like, absolutely not, that we have to cut more, that's too crazy. But no, we made it happen. It actually came out pretty darn identical to the intent. So I was really happy. And I do love our new bar. After that, we had to prepare the signage package. This is a theme park. Like, zones should have names. They should have a personality. So we had to come up, we had at this point landed on the names, and we had to make signs that kind of reflected the aesthetic. So we have the arcade, Club 01, which I love that sign, but it ended up being totally unreadable. So don't make signs with broken lighting like that. And the story room, arena, and the midway, everything had its own little personality. We looked, this is an elevation of our biggest, longest wall. You can see how we applied the Dazzle camo on here. This is a wall that really dominates most of Two-Bit Circus. You can see it from every distance. We arrived at a final look for the booths of the midway, which we wanted to make it look almost. It's all very raw, old school materials, but we almost wanted to look like a crappy Unity texture job, where things didn't quite line up and all the grains were all mismatched. So that was kind of a way that we picked to mash the three aesthetics together. Was almost like, what if like a crappy AI deep learning thing took a bunch of these things and just spat it out in a random and error-laden glitchy way. And then we came up with a front desk design, which was modular, could be split apart. We could use a section of this in a different part of the park as a stop-in for people signing up to play VR games and whatnot. We had a radio tower that's kind of part of our branding that we use as trussing to attach TVs and fun things in there. So we had made a bunch of really amazing decisions and things were going on, but even still, the internal team, the design and fabrication team would still come up to me and say, I've been working so hard on this cabinet for the arcade or on this midway game, and we've seen the creative spec. It's too long and too hard to read. I still don't know what this place looks like, and that's when I decided, like, I really need to show the team how everything that they're working on is going to come together. So I called everybody who was working on a particular attraction, told them to send me all the 3D models, all the things that they had, and that's when I created this fly-through. I put in everything, because everything that we were building had some form of model made. We converted everything to SketchUp. I put it all in there, and I put this all together, and I had an all-hands meeting and showed them, like, and this is, by the way, we opened last September. This was in March before it. So we were very close to opening, and the team was still telling me, we don't know what this place looks like. So it was a lot of pressure, and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? But after putting this thing together that helped everybody visualize what all their work is going to be, it was a super clarifying moment, a big rallying call, and everybody was super psyched and kept on going and pushing through. So we've seen this. Maybe we can skip this. Anyways, you know, it was time to roll up our sleeves and finish up. The place, you know, it was a raw warehouse, and we had to do a lot of work to it. We had to replace the entire roof. We had to rip up the floor, and because we were dumb enough to think that it was a smart idea to have a bar in the middle of everything. Now we got to run lines to it. It's incredible the amount of engineering and logistics that goes into something like this. And here I am, a creative director who's just like, I just want to make a cool place, do it like this, and really getting an understanding of the requirement, the things that you're asking people to do. Here's a bunch of our team working to make the plays. That's our design and fabrication people up there. You can see some of the Midway booth in there and how that applies to the concept art that you saw earlier. They're finishing up our Midway games. That's Eric, our CTO and mat inventor, programming Global 1 prototypes. And as you can see, that's all cardboard that's all built with tablets stuck to it, because that's what we do. We just prototype things way, you know, as far as we possibly can before we clad them up and make them pretty. Scenic painters going through all the little corners, HVAC, lighting, just a gigantic, honest-to-God circus of people working. So we're very close to opening date, and obviously things have changed a lot, but the place is still looking really cool. That crazy Space Mountain thing I told you about got reduced to these things that we built that actually hold 2 seats each and have a D-box chair, the same that you would use at a 4DX cinema, that provides motion for the tank. We tested out much crazier motion platforms, like really intense 6-degree platforms, and it turned out to be too much for most people. So we kind of had to dial that down a bit. And so you're seeing here a bit of the VR arena. And what we ended up doing is actually doing dazzle camo all over the back. Again, very last minute, I was going crazy. What are we going to do? We lost the theming on the front. And so we very quickly put together the dazzle camo, and then we uplit it, and it's actually one of the coolest looking parts, ended up being one of the coolest parts of the arcade. Here's a look into some of the Midway booths. That's Demolition Zone, a game you play by smashing a wrecking ball against a Unity game of buildings. That was a crazy photo op from an artist where you stick your heads in these TVs. But you can see how that zone glows in orange. It's all warm lighting, and it feels very different from all the other ones. Story rooms, we got our crazy wall of doors made. I was very surprised. There were fake doors, there were real doors, painted doors, all sorts of things. I loved it. And then building code came in and slapped these red stickers right next to the actual working doors and ruined the whole paint job. Because it turns out that it's important for people to know which doors open and which not in case there's an emergency. So, I allow it. Anyways, this is the day, right, maybe an hour or two before we opened. And we finally got to see what the place, because we were building until the very last second, and we finally got a sense to, a way to see how the place looked like, the full thing. And honestly, you know, we had to make a lot of cuts, a lot of compromises, but I was pretty psyched with it really looked like a fun, awesome place to hang out and play in. And so we have a successful opening and had a really fun day. So now I'm just going to show you a couple of slides of people enjoying the park as is. This is over at the bar. Our horse butts came out awesome. People love sitting on them and taking pictures. We have all sorts of amazing craft beer on tap. Here are people enjoying the Midway. You can see how the sign ended up. This is a game called Last Ball Standing. It's kind of a Mario Party style game where you actually use circus, like these are the balls that circus clowns walk on. We turn them into basically a giant trackball, and you play this game using those. And so you get the kind of like more old school carnival feel to it. Then the arcade, which is all very purple and pink and very neon-y. We have a lot of the classics and a lot of new things. We have games that are like full body Tetris. That one is Button Wall, a really fun original game that's kind of a mashup between Whack-A-Mole and Twister. You have to like press all these lights while getting in the way of everybody else. Story rooms, as I showed you before, we got the wall of doors done, but inside each room we also themed it. There's a VR experience that happens in the swamps of Louisiana. We have a spaceship that teams go into and basically play different roles of running missions on the spaceship. And we have like a Mayan temple dungeon, which is more of a classic escape room. This was the cabanas with people sitting down and having fun and making fun of the person in the headset. We had this gigantic projection screen in the back that makes you look really cool. It has all these windows that kind of look outside, so people walking by can see all these crazy lights coming out of it. The arena, this is where all the crazy VR stuff happens, and so we have full roaming, we have seated experiences. We have these booths that just provide introductory experiences for people who have never done VR. That's a little bit simpler. And then we have janky prototypes that we've built. This was an early prototype of that bungee jumping experience, where you just have to take a step forward and not really fall. But it's really realistic, and it drives people insane. Club 01, here's an example of the host wearing an absolutely ridiculous suit, hosting a game, everybody over on the screens. We have lights on the top that provide feedback whether you got something right, and people have a blast in here. And so yeah, so that's a good little gallery of how it all ended up in the end. Now, was it incredibly successful and was everybody happy at the very beginning? Absolutely not. We had a lot of surprises. The first one that really hit us hard was that, and you know, you've probably seen this picture before, that this is what you intend people to do, and this is how they will actually do it. And it's very hard at a scale like this. You can't. It's very hard to test for that. We were able to user test and do all sorts of things for every individual game, but as a whole experience, as a whole park, there's really no way to kind of to know what's going to happen. So the first thing that we notice is that narrative that we spent so much time writing on the creative specifications, that had people going and trying out, you know, casual things and making their way up to the coolest and experience, was totally off. Everybody would come in and it would be like, what is the coolest thing you have? What is the crazy? I want to go do the VR. I want to go do these intense things that take a long time and have low throughput. You can only put a few people at a time through it. So that caused problems. All of a sudden, we were overloaded with lines for these top premium attractions, and everybody was ignoring all the other cool stuff that was there. So that was a big surprise. Also, that the intent that we had to overwhelm people visually when they step in, for them to go like, wow, this is amazing, I can do anything here, was instead interpreted like, holy crap, what do I do here? Where do I even start? It was too overwhelming. It was actually too difficult. Like that familiar entry point that we wanted to provide, we were missing that a little bit because there's just so much that happens so fast when you come in. And so as a result, we just had a lot of overload on the front desk, people piling up, asking like, how do I even get started? What do I do here? How this place works? And so yeah, so we had to get to work. It was a really rough opening with a lot of learning experience, but it opened up a really amazing challenge, which is, all right, and now we have the place, now we have the things, now we can user test and we can make this place better. So the past year, since we've been open, has been very much about observing. I forgot to mention, when you saw the architectural floor plans, the whole left side of it was our new offices. While we were building this park, we were also moving our offices over. So that was another thing to pile up on the things that we had to do. But now we are there. We literally have windows where you can look down and observe people playing the park, and we have the ability to go down and fix things easily and take things in. It gives us a lot of leeway on like constantly refreshing this place. And so I'm finishing up, but I just want to give you an example of like some of the like live prototyping that we're doing. This is in order to, when we realized that lines were forming in sort of weird ways and people were self-organizing in ways that we did not intend them to, we decided to start marking things down on the ground and follow what they were doing. And so right now the approach has been to kind of iterate on creating natural cueing lines and watching people behave, watching people sort of obey them or ignore them. And once we've established like this is the way that people are self-organizing, we go ahead and paint that down permanently. But it's always tricky because our layout is always changing. So anytime we got to pull a game in, we got to do that part over again. So it's been a really interesting year of understanding the challenges between operating a place like this that we intend to be special and look amazing, but also has operational needs, And it's been quite a year, but it's been very successful. I really encourage you guys and everyone to come out. It's a really fun time. We got a lot of things to do. And now I'll just open this up to questions. That's the end of it.
Any questions? Go ahead, Pat.
Oh yeah. I just want to ask really quick, like, how did your company go from marketing in terms of what was that transition from business to business marketing and then from business to consumer? Did you how did you just get a ton of people to show up here and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Obviously, I'm only presenting one part of the story here, which was the building of the park. But at the same time that we're doing this, the creative team is also trying to completely rebrand ourselves. We had a very particular look and feel that was only meant to make us look like an artisanal little tech shop. Now we got to be a fresh and exciting new brand, and so that requires overhauling all our color palettes, all the illustrations, and the things that we need to do. And that actually had to happen before the park was being built. So we had to sort of look ahead. We have to build a brand that sustains a place. It's no longer just going to be a website, no longer going to be a 2D image you see somewhere. It's going to be a 3D environment that you live in. And so it was a very iterative process because we had a particular color scheme, but we knew we couldn't just paint the whole park that color scheme. Every area deserves more life, more color. So we have the graphic brand, which is a more limited kind of palette, and then we have the park color palette. And we've been kind of melding those together, and the brand has been evolving a lot. Like that dazzle camouflage that we had on the walls has become many times the background patterns that we use in our ads and everything. And so another thing that was really challenging is that we had to build a website for this. And we don't have a place, we don't have photos. Nobody knows what this looks like. We're still building it, but yet we had to open and have a website ready that told people what this was. So it was really difficult trying to market a place that doesn't exist. We had to try to tell a story of the things that we were going to be able to do through stock imagery, other videos, music, all the other senses, and then slowly, as the place got built, really start compiling true images and actual photos from the park and fill up our website. But yeah, it was a very big change. It's a very different audience to have a client think you're cool to have people think you're cool.
What aspects of Two-Bit Circus' original business venture were most useful in creating the micro?
It's really hard to pick one because almost every zone, the reason we made all these different zones is because we had already dabbled in each of these things. So we had made arcade games, so that was easy for the arcade zone. We had at one time an entire cinematic virtual reality team. We produced really high-end cinematic, and that means not video game or game engine VR, and produced the haptics to experience these things. So we had a lot of experience on what it takes to make pleasant and cool virtual reality. We had I guess the experience of making the branded escape room type of things helped us. That was really helpful in understanding how to make a themed environment and how to have a production design process for how to theme a place and how to make scenic and things like that. It's it's difficult to pick just one because every single zone really helped. But for the big ones, story rooms and the VR arena, which are our blockbuster attractions, I would definitely say making branded escape rooms and VR productions help the most.
When you set out to make the experience, initially when you decided we're going to build a park, did you want to make a park because you thought that's what people wanted to see, or did you make it because that's what you wanted to make?
Yes.
Obviously, at Two-Bit Circus, we've always been sort of very, very passion-driven. We like to work on things that we think are cool, and rarely, thank God, rarely did we have to just take a project for the money. We were able to really pick the things that we were interested in. But this was really an opportunity because we had done certain things that we knew we could pull this off. But at the same time, we saw a need of like, what is the coolest stuff that you can do in out of home? Like malls are sort of dying. There are some escape rooms. We didn't quite see. We didn't see the variety out there of something that was really kind of presenting something new for people to do. There were escape rooms and there's VR out of home things, but again, those were all like self-contained. There's the Dave & Buster's of the world that are providing that, and we just thought that there was a need, that there is a reason people are just constantly staying at home. They're just hanging out on their phones. There's not much of a reason for them to go out and hang out, and we think it's really special to be face to face and person to person. And so we thought that there was a big need in the world to have experience types like that. So we definitely saw that there was a need for it, that we had to convince people that this is cool because obviously they're going to want to stay home watching Netflix. So we had to provide something compelling for them to do. But we also really did want to make the clubhouse the venue of our dreams.
How did you link in with your investors and know that they were good investors and not investors? It's kind of a weird question, but because they want their money and like it's like a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't super involved into how we picked our investors, but they were very much. It was people who were really looking at this particular field and felt the same way as we did, that there was a gap, there was a void in this type of out of home experience, and who were looking for somebody with a good idea for what to do with. I mean, there's just a big opportunity out there. Like malls right now are kind of dying. Retail is dying, and so there's a ton of real estate out there of malls trying to reinvent themselves as experiential places. So we were looking very specifically to investors who wanted to go down that route, a risky route, because you never know. So in terms of the individual partners that we pulled in, can't tell you much about their backgrounds, but it was a long process to get the investment and a lot of like testing out and meeting with lots of different people until we found the right people who had the same values and wanted to see the same thing out of home entertainment that we did.
Can you say question? I have a question. Can you say something about how your company has kind of evolved after this experience in terms of kind of the change, just the day-to-day working as a team? Because you have so many different crafts under one room.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change that happened is about, I want to say maybe around the time that the 3D model came out, 4 months before, we literally doubled in size. We were at that point maybe 30-something, 40-something people, and we went all the way over to 100 because we're building the park, but we have to hire the people who run the park. And so the biggest evolution was going from literally a team of designers, engineers, and creative people who make cool stuff to a team that's half that and half like operational wizards that can make a kitchen like this work, that can make a bar run fluidly, that knows customer service. It's an entirely new field for us, and that has been incredibly awesome to experience this first year, to have these two sides that have this really healthy tension of, hey, we have this crazy idea. Wait, hold on a second. That's going to be very difficult to implement, and it puts a lot of load on these. And us learning, okay, well, this is how you create from scratch without having to have disapprovals or things. Create experiences that are already operational and very natural to it. So that's been the biggest experience, just having that reality check of whatever it is that we create in here needs to be operated, and it needs to, in some form, some way or form, contribute to the user experience or contribute to the bottom line. So that, I think, has been a major difference in the evolution.
Do you still kind of keep some of those original traits and original kind of procedures that you had in the past? Like, for example, the prototyping you mentioned, you still do in-house for new games. You're still kind of experimenting and making new things all the time, right?
Absolutely.
With this.
The fact that the place is running now and that we have a whole operational team running the things that we have means that we've had the chance for our design and fabrication team to go back to the drawing board and come up with new things. In fact, as an example, we just launched about a week ago an absolutely new story room experience. It's called Dr. Botcher's Minute Medical School, and it's a place where you can get your medical degree in 20 minutes. And it's kind of a puppet show. Like there's a doctor puppet, and you're operating on this wacky kind of puppet patient, and he's teaching you like how to like deal with diagnosing. It's all very slapstick, very crazy, and everybody's going around. They have wild doctor names and everything. And so we went back to the drawing board and we're like, let's do this from scratch. And we spent about 3 months prototyping this upstairs in a little corner of our place with a mannequin, like a store-bought mannequin with holes drilled in it. And build the experience, brought in groups, tested it over and over, and finally it came out. We then put a big, awesome scenic pass at the end, made it all look really high end, and it's out, and people are loving it. So we still do this, and now we're finding opportunities because we don't have to think so much about the operations side. We can be really creative and come up with new things.
So, what was like the most challenging or like hard to learn skill that you got out of this, or hardest thing you had to do? Inversely, what was like the best thing that you ended up discovering?
What would be the hardest or the best? The hardest, just to go through those, I think the hardest and I think the most enriching was really making that giant leap in scale. I had, again, my background is as an industrial designer, so I had worked, the most I had previously worked on was, again, room scale. Could figure out the ergonomics and the user experience of a place like that, but I'm not a trained architect. I am not formally trained in theme park design. I didn't have any experience in that. And so the ability to do this from scratch, not really knowing much and learning through the process and like talking to people who've done this before was extremely rewarding. I now feel like as flawed a baby as we have, it's an awesome, beautiful baby that I love. And because we're actively looking to make more of these, we want to expand, we know that the plans for the next few are just going to be massively improved. And now I honestly do feel like, I can design something at this level. And it's been incredibly encouraging. So I've been very psyched about that. I mean, that's one of many things that I learned, but I think the most rewarding and the highest level was that.
What's your favorite or is there a favorite of the experiences in the park? You don't. Anyway.
There are a couple again because each zone has its own coolest thing. But I'm particularly fond of a game called Super Thunderblocks. It's in the arcade, and there was a picture of it. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Where's the arcade? It's this one right here that I talked about. I find this game absolutely hilarious. The theme, the art direction on it is super funny. The music is amazing, and it gets people moving in really interesting ways. We're not huge fans of just having everything be a joystick and a button. We really wanted to make an arcade where you did different things. So using your entire body to control this is really fun. And it's just really fun to watch somebody step up and they're like doing all these crazy dance moves. That's like these walls of blocks are trying to hit them. They're trying to hit all the green ones and miss all the red ones. And it just gets faster and faster and just people are going insane and like breaking out in sweats. It's just really fun and a very different experience. And when we first built this and the cabinet came through, it's styled like an 80s treadmill. We're really looking at like 80s, like crappy acro. What's the name of the jumping jacks and everything? I forget. Was that aerobics and not acrobatics? Aerobics. We looked at a lot of that stuff, and we just want to make a hilarious like aerobics game. And so it came out, and this came out fairly early in our process, and I was blown away by how awesome it was and how beautiful the styling on it and the finish. I was really proud when I saw this. Like the level of confidence of like, oh my God, we're gonna have a cool place with really cool games really went up over the roof. But yeah, there's just plenty of stuff. The raft in this virtual reality experience in story rooms is incredible. It's super cinematic. It's really immersive, and it's a total hoot. And yeah, there's just I could pick every zone and pick a favorite that I love just as much.
We have no more questions. Last one. Thank you so much, Hector, for showing us the park, and we have to go see it basically and visit it. It's very fun. Thank you so much. Thank you.